Today marks the first Jury Duty Appreciation Week in Canada. And if you're wondering why Canadians need a week to thank their jurors, or if you're thinking, isn't it your civic duty to be a juror? Consider this one former juror. Tina Danzer was juror number 1 in the Paul Bernardo murder trial. She and her fellow jurors were witness to some of the most horrific details in the very graphic case. This trial took place for more than 3 months in Ontario back in 1995. And in Ontario, employers are required to give people time off for jury duty, but the law does not require employers to pay an employee during that time. So what's compensation like for a juror who dedicates weeks to a trial? And what about mental health supports for being subject to horrific details day in and day out? Well, we're fortunate tonight to have joining us Tina Danzer. She is now the Chief Operating Officer for the Canadian Juries Commission. And the Commission's CEO, Mark Farrant, joins us as well. Thank you so much for being here. Tina, let's start with you for just a moment. Why exactly do we need this day now? And if you could tell us what progress has been made since you were a juror back in '95.
Well, I think it's needed, because people give up a lot to perform jury duty. They step away from their jobs, they step away from their life and their families. It's extremely stressful. Not everyone suffers trauma like I did from graphic evidence, but the trauma, there is a lot of stress in dealing with the fact that, your employer is not happy that you're gone from your job. Your coworkers are not happy that they have to pick up the slack. You're worried you could lose your job. How do you pay for this? In Ontario, it's $0 from day 1 to day 10. Then it's like $49 or $40 up until day 49. You got to pay for parking. What about daycare? What about elder care? There's a lot that is involved. And, there's a lot of stress that goes in along the trial. Deliberations is something that people are extremely stressed over, because no matter if you vote guilty or not guilty, you are affecting somebody's life.
It's a huge responsibility. It is.
It is. And just like an employee who likes to make a nice salary, you also appreciate it when your boss tells you you've been doing a great job. And so we feel that jurors really need to be thanked for the job that they do for their country. It does happen in some U.S. states. It's never happened here, so we have lobbied to make this happen, and, it is a good thing. It's important to thank people for doing this.
And this is why your organization now has brought forward Canadian Jury Appreciation Week. Tina, if you could clarify, so right now you're a juror here in this province. You make about $40 a day. You said childcare is not covered, parking's not covered. They often put you up in a hotel when you're sequestered. What about mental health supports? That is something that changed thanks to Mark, but can you start with what was available back in 1995 for you? Nothing, from what I understand.
In my case, I was extremely lucky because Justice Lesage, the judge on the trial, he understood how much trauma that the jurors went through. And he actually requisitioned the court to provide counseling for us. I was diagnosed with PTSD afterwards, but I gladly accepted the counseling, and I just assumed that that's how it was for everybody until Mark reached out to me and said no. And we then, together with others, went to lobby the federal government for change.
As you point out, that was something available to you in 1995, but not to everyone, which brings us to Mark. So, Mark, if you could share with us that you actually sued the Ontario government because you suffered from PTSD after sitting as a foreman, and this brought about change.
Well, we're very fortunate that Ontario took leadership to introduce the juror support program in 2016, and we continued to lobby provinces across the country to follow suit. And so British Columbia introduced a juror support program, Saskatchewan introduced a juror support program, and Newfoundland and Labrador have provided improved services and supports to jurors. But it's really a national conversation because there are many provinces that have no support at all for jurors who have done their civic duty. And as Tina said, jury pay is the catalyst to improve diversity and representation on juries. If we're talking about systemic racism in the justice system and improving access to justice, it really begins with jury duty. How can we expect to have representation on juries and representation in court when people can't afford to pay or can't afford to attend because of low jury pay? And so juries will continue to be overrepresented by retirees and people working for large corporations.
You make a great point, because anyone who has been to jury duty, sat in on jury duty, which I have as a journalist, you go up and you're asked, you know, will this cause you any undue hardship? And you say, well, my employer won't pay me. Well, I'd have to get a babysitter. I can't afford that. And then, you know, sometimes you're dismissed is what they say. You're dismissed and they move on to someone else. And what happens, as you point out, that eliminates people who maybe live in neighborhoods that are low income. That eliminates people who are fairly, let's say, new to the country but are a permanent resident. That eliminates a lot of people who provide a voice. Again, it's a jury of your peers, and that means all of our peers, as you point out. I want to ask you what you're looking for, because Mark and Tina, as you both know, Mark, several years ago, Attorney General Yasser Naqvi had commented on this, or his office at least, that it's not an income you're making as a juror, it's an honorarium. Do you want this to be an income?
No, we want it to be fair compensation for your time and for the ability to step away from home and step away from family to serve without incurring undue financial hardships. Because we've heard from jurors who, you know, after the first month of a trial are doing okay out of pocket, but then suddenly in the second month are having to go into debt because they're supplementing their income on their line of credit. So the House of Commons Justice Committee in 2018 in their landmark report recommended $120 per day as the baseline. Even that recommendation is now out of date given the roaring inflation and price increases that we're seeing now. Quebec has the highest jury pay in the country at $160 a day. But other jurisdictions have gone well beyond to provide a measure of financial support to jurors. If we look to Australia, jury pay has been raised in all states of Australia well beyond $160 a day, upwards of $240 a day, because they understood that representation and diversity was an issue in Australia as it is in Canada.
This is such a great topic. I'm going to have to ask to keep your answers just short, only because of the time we have left in the show, because I have 3 more questions, but the one I want to ask you is, because we're in an election period here, why are we not hearing more about this, Tina? Why is this not a top ballot box issue, considering jury duty impacts everyone, or could?
You know, here's the thing. When Mark and I first testified at the House of Commons, it was full of MPs from every party, and everybody said, oh my God, I didn't know, I didn't know, I didn't know. And for years and years, jurors haven't talked about this, so nobody does know. So it has taken Mark and I and the commission to lobby, and people are starting to pay attention, and we hope to make it an issue.
And what is this secrecy law, and why does it need to change, if you can explain quickly, Tina?
So the Secrecy Act, it stops people from talking about the deliberations that happened during the trial. We are trying to change that only specifically so that you can talk to a mental health professional, because again, deliberations is one of the most stressful times of the trial, because you are deciding about someone's life, whether guilty or not guilty. Is it the accused or a victim's family? Someone is affected by your choice, and being able to talk about the stress it has caused you is important.
And Mark, finally, if we can just quickly end on this note. Right now, we're following the Jacob Hogard trial. He has said he's not guilty against all charges. What are some of the jurors you think experiencing there? It's a sexual assault case. What support is available to them? Because you brought about that change, as you noted.
Well, there is support available to them post-trial in Ontario through the juror support program. So there are counseling sessions available to them and a 1-800 toll-free number. There is no support for them in trial at this time. It's important for them to recognize the important work that they do and look for self-care mechanisms and support on their own at this point. It's some of the work that we're doing in British Columbia, actually, to train BC sheriffs to provide support for jurors trial as part of the commission's work.
Mark, Tina, thank you so much. Obviously, we could talk a lot more about this. We'll have you back again. Such an important conversation. I think you taught a lot of people at home quite a bit tonight, so thank you both.
Thank you, Christina. Thanks.
In Toronto, the dining scene is a vibrant conversation between the chef, their teams, and gourmet, who are keen to challenge them to trigger everyday new discoveries. Toronto is no doubt one of the top tourism destinations in North America, and its gastronomic experience deserves to be known widely.
Toronto will be the first Canadian city to get its own Michelin guide. Inspectors have already been anonymously following Toronto's food scene. They're rating restaurants based on quality of food, mastery of flavor, cooking technique, personality of the chef, and consistency. The top restaurants will get Michelin stars, considered a global seal of approval. The news is seen as a big step toward reviving Toronto's diverse food scene after 2 years of pandemic closures, restrictions, and uncertainty. To discuss, we welcome to CP24 Tonight Andrew Weir, Executive Vice President of Destination Development at Destination Toronto, and world-renowned French chef and restaurateur, Chef Danielle Baloob. Thanks to both of you. Andrew, let's start with you. How did this happen?
Well, it's really a testament to Toronto's culinary scene. You know, there's this level of depth and quality, and I think what Michelin recognized is the incredible diversity, but also the quality of the culinary scene that draws from experiences and flavors from around the world, but then does something special with it here in the city. So it's taken about 5 years of work with the Michelin team and a number of partners to make this a reality. Obviously slowed a little bit by the pandemic, but this really has an opportunity to change the way the world sees Toronto and really, I think, open more eyes and to help us lead with culinary, which is such a compelling story for Toronto.
Can you talk a bit, Andrew, about the process and how many restaurants might be added to the list?
Well, I wish we knew more about the restaurants themselves. That's really up to Michelin and the inspectors. There's the independence of the process is very carefully maintained throughout the whole process. So we've got no line of sight at all to the restaurants that could be. But what I can tell you is that Michelin was actually here about 4 years ago and had inspectors in the city for a couple of months, ate their way around the city, and was evaluating because obviously they have to determine whether or not there's enough a robustness, whether or not there's a substantial enough culinary scene to support the guide and to be able to sustain it over a number of years. They found very quickly that was the case in Toronto, no surprise to those of us who live here. So then the process began to work with them on looking at what does this look like over a number of years? How can we build more stories around this? How can we share those stories with travelers around the world? And any destination would want this. Any destination would want the voice of Michelin as an authentic, independent voice, helping share the story about how diverse and the high quality of our culinary scene.
So let's hear about why. Chef Baloob, you've got 2 Michelin stars. This is really the holy grail for chefs. What kind of boost in business do you see once you get that kind of recognition?
Well, to get to 2-star, I guess you already have a recognition among your customer and you have a following, and but it can sometimes propulse you to a world stage rather than a local or national stage. And, you know, Toronto, I'm so excited that Michelin is coming because I know a lot of young talent that are rising and making that city very vibrant with food and a lot of creativity. Ingredients are getting greater and greater, so the source of good cuisine is, of course, ingredient, and that's very important. Talent, they have the talent. There is a lot of great chefs in Canada, and Toronto is well served for it.
So Meg, let's bring you in. Meg Marshall, Community Manager of the Queen Street West BIA. Thanks for being with us. Toronto has such a unique food scene. Any guesses from you on what might make the list? And do you expect the Toronto Guide will actually reflect the city's culinary diversity?
I think it absolutely will. Speaking strictly in Queen West, I think Aloe and Ration would be really great contenders for the Michelin Star Guide. And I really think it has the trickle-down effect where we start to have more reservations being booked, more people coming to the city. Hopefully we fill up more hotel rooms. Hopefully more people want to do business in Toronto because there's more of a reason to stay and stay longer.
Yeah, I want to ask Andrew about that a bit more, about the business aspect. What will this mean for investment in the City of Toronto's culinary scene and sector?
Well, it means a couple things. I think it's important to recognize that Michelin is, the stars tend to get most of the attention, but it's about much more than that. There are many more restaurants that will be part of the guide and the selection than just the ones that receive stars. That's the very elite group of restaurants, but it's a much broader list than that. And one of the things that Michelin considers is the value, and so it's. Clearly there's going to be a focus on for part of it on high-end dining, and that's important. There's a place for that, but it is much broader than that. And one of the things, as we did our research, that really that we found compelling was the fact that when Michelin is in a destination, it becomes a catalyst for so much more investment throughout the whole ecosystem. One of the things they value, as Chef was just talking about, is the local sourcing of ingredients. So as chefs and restaurateurs start to recognize more the importance of that in the Michelin evaluation, that prompts more restaurants to source locally. That supports the growing community. So this is really about a much broader ecosystem. And when visitors travel here, whether they actually seek out the Michelin restaurants or not, because they all have to eat when they're here, it elevates the entire culinary scene.
Okay, Chef Baloob, for restaurateurs that feel like they might be a contender for a Michelin star, what's your advice to them in the next couple of months?
Well, they just have to stay focused the way they have been to build their business, their reputation, and their trust. And they just have to be themselves because, we don't cook for food critics. We don't cook for guide. We cook for our customer. And I think if you make your customer very, very happy and the customer come back, then there's a chance that not only your restaurant will be world renowned, but also Michelin will notice the great work you do. So, of course, I want as many stars as possible in Toronto. But like Andrew say, it's about also certain restaurants that distinguish themselves for their simplicity, for their affordability, but also for the taste of what they are and what they represent.
For anyone
having a big gourmand mansion, it's a big thing as well for a casual restaurant.
And Chef, for anyone who's tried to book at a Michelin restaurant, they'll know that the wait can sometimes be months or longer. Right now, we're in the middle of this labor shortage. What's your advice to restaurateurs who might make the list in terms of how to prepare to meet the potential demand?
In New York, we went through the same challenges as Toronto is going through as well. And we gradually raised up. I think today, restaurateurs are very conscious that the balance between labor and demand, the demand might be greater, but the labor might not be complete yet. So it's a question of making sure that the shift you offer to your staff, meaning that how many days you want to be open, how many days you want to operate, has a lot to do with what you want to accomplish with your staff. And I think every restaurateur is seeing that very carefully. Places that used to be open for lunch now just prefer to be open just for dinner and things like that. So I think everyone have to see where they belong. But what's very important is then they have to continue to maintain what they dream of for their own place. And the dream, I'm sure, is for many restaurateurs, is to earn a star, of course.
A really exciting time. Yeah, one or two for sure. Thanks so much for your time and your insight, Meg Marshall, Andrew Weir, and Chef Baloob. We appreciate this.
Thank you.
Exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
The U.S. Senate has blocked consideration of a key bill that would make abortion legal throughout the United States. The bill was defeated 51-49 amid strong Republican opposition. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin voted with Republicans to stop the measure from advancing. The vote comes as the U.S. Supreme Court may be considering overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling, sparking protests across the country. Joining us live tonight is political and social commentator Avis Jones-DeWeaver, who's also co-founder of Max Black Media. Let me ask you first why it was so important for Democrats to hold this vote this afternoon, as we reported earlier in the show, if they knew it was likely to fail.
Well, they would tell you that they did that to just have people on the record so that they could make it very clear to the American people that all the Republicans stood united against a woman's right to choose. And perhaps they're looking to use that strategically in terms of their midterm election plans. I'm not so sure that it's very helpful. I believe that having a pattern now of bringing things to the floor, knowing that they don't have the vote to pass it, leaves them looking ineffective as a party. And instead, they should, in my opinion, have just focused from the beginning on how they can leverage this leak and what will surely happen when the full decision is released later on this summer into electoral victory come the midterms.
So, Avis, what options do Democrats have right now, not just to pass a legislation, but to protect abortion rights as they still hold on to most of the power?
They really don't have many options right now, because the bottom line is the way that the Senate rules are, they actually would need 60 votes to get past any types of filibuster. And it's become, nauseatingly clear that we have key people within the Democratic Party that's not in favor of overturning the whole filibuster rule. And so really the only recourse that there is to make sure that the Democratic Party not only retains control of Congress post midterms, but also expands their majority in the Senate so that they don't have to depend on getting a chunk of Republican votes in order to pass a Democratic agenda, because the Republicans have made it exceedingly clear that they will vote as a bloc against any and everything that the Democrats are looking to push forward.
And of course, it'll be tough to expand power, as most ruling parties don't particularly have a great midterm elections. And you mentioned the midterms. The abortion debate is intensely political, of course, particularly in the U.S. What can you expect from each party heading into the all-important fall midterm elections?
Well, you're exactly right in saying that historically speaking, the party in power actually loses ground during midterm elections immediately following presidential elections. But I believe that we might see something that is counter to what we have seen historically. This particular ruling would be cataclysmic. This is the first time in U.S. history that we've actually had overturning precedent in America, specifically to roll back rights instead of to expand rights. I believe that there are a lot of Republicans who are not really happy about having caught the car here in terms of this multi-decade chase that they've been on with regards to Roe. They've been using it very deftly as a political strategy to win elections, but now that they've gotten this decision, they aren't focusing on that at all because they know that it's a political loser. The vast majority of Americans are against this decision, if it ultimately is that, once the full decision is actually released. And I think that that could lead to a huge shift in terms of the electoral outcomes that we will see in November than what would have naturally been the case if Roe would not have been overturned.
If this is overturned, can you explain to our Canadian viewers what abortion rights will look like across the U.S. if this goes ahead?
It will be a multi-state nightmare for women all across this country. Basically what this would do, it would leave it down to states to make decisions about what rights women have in that state and what rights they don't have. And roughly half of our states have already laws that are ready to go. The minute that Roe is overturned, that would make it either completely illegal for women to have abortion, even in cases of rape or incest, or if they need it in order to save their own lives, or other restrictions on abortion. So literally this would mean that there will either be women that are going back to the back alleys and ending up in emergency rooms again, dying unnecessarily, because we all know that this will not mean the end to abortion. It will mean the end to safe health care when women make the decision that they do not want to carry a pregnancy. Or else they'll have to pay for travel to go someplace, another state, in some instances, who knows, maybe even another country, in order to be able to have access to a safe abortion. That means that only those people who have the means to do that will have that access. And I believe that also means that we're going to see a lot of women who will be dead or maimed as a result of trying to undergo that procedure themselves.
Okay, Avis Jones-DeWeaver, thank you so much for joining us for this very important discussion tonight.
Thank you.
The first direct image of the gentle giant in the center of our galaxy, Sagittarius A star.
Quite an incredible photo right there. Scientists have unveiled the first ever image of a supermassive black hole lurking in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And the Leafs are, of course, center of the universe. The black hole, called Sagittarius A, is only the second black hole to ever be photographed. It has 4 million times the mass of our sun and is located 26,000 light years away from Earth. Joining us live tonight is CTV News science and technology specialist Dan Riskin. So Dan, walk us through exactly what we're looking at. And I must admit, it's mesmerizing to look into.
Yeah, I mean, depending how you feel. Some people are like, well, it looks like a glowing donut. And other people are like, this is the most fundamentally interesting thing I've ever seen in my life. And so there's a middle ground, I think, for everybody else on this one. Basically, in 2019, astronomers figured out how to see a black hole, which should be impossible because the whole thing with a black hole is they have so much gravity that not even light can escape. And of course, the thing about the image is the middle is dark because the black hole is there in the middle and the light can't escape. But around that black hole, there's a bunch of energy. There's light swirling around. You can imagine shining a flashlight so that the light gets pulled in towards that black hole and ends up going around in a circle, almost like a coin going around the drain at one of those, science center things where they take your money and it goes around like that. That's happening with light. And so that's what you're seeing there. And they imaged a black hole in 2019, which was kind of the easiest one to see up in the sky. But this is a really important black hole because we live in the Milky Way galaxy. We live in this spiral galaxy in space. And at the center of that galaxy is a black hole that's holding all of it together. This is the thing that holds all of the Milky Way together. And we thought it was there because of the way all the planets move, but we'd never seen it before. And now today we finally have a picture of that thing that, as you say, it's not the center of the universe, but it's the center of the galaxy.
Well, I must admit, you had me at giant glowing donut, but describe why astronomers are calling this a gentle giant on a near starvation diet and not a voracious cosmic destroyer.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is that this is settled into a place where it's not taking in a lot of material. Most of the things around it have settled into steady orbits where they orbit it, just like our planets orbit the sun. A lot of the stars and their whole star systems are moving around this. And so we knew its location from that. But this is an opportunity to see it. And it was very hard for these scientists to see because last time they looked at one that was very far away, didn't have a lot of stuff in the way. It was kind of like a clear view of the black hole. This one, I mean, if you imagine we're on this spiral galaxy with a ton of stars, and we're looking through all those stars toward the center. And so there's lots in the way. It also moves very quickly. So it was a very hard image to get. But just to drive home how amazing that image is, the size of the black hole that they had to zoom in on with their amazing telescopes, it's the equivalent of trying to look at an orange on the surface of the moon. That's how tiny that black hole is when it's seen from Earth. And yet here's this image that we're all looking at.
So let's talk about the incredible technology that it took to capture this image. How difficult was this? This is a worldwide effort.
It is a worldwide effort. And what's cool is there's a trick that astronomers can do where if they have telescopes in different parts of the Earth and the telescopes can talk to each other, they can actually turn them into a giant telescope the size of the Earth. And so last time when they looked at a black hole, they had 7 of these things that they were able to use. And basically it's the difference between the image that reaches 2 of them and they compare, and that gives them some data. And then they compare to these 2 and that gives them some data. And then they compare it to these 2. And so they had 7 that they were comparing all among for the last one. For this one, they needed a better image. So they brought another observatory at the South Pole online for this one. And it was able to give them an 8th perspective. And because that 8th one can be compared to all 7 of the others, it increased the amount of data by a ton and just gave them a lot more resolving power to see something that was just really hard to see.
All right, so we're running out of time, but just quickly, just describe how important this image is and what does it mean in helping understand our own galaxy?
A couple of quick things. One, it looks an awful lot like the last one we saw, and that's a big deal for scientists. They really are excited about that because it means that black holes may have a lot of similarities that you can expect to see across the board, and that helps them when they're making their guesses about the ones they haven't taken a look at. The other thing is the size of the hole in the middle of that is exactly the size predicted by Einstein's equation. So it's yet another example of Einstein being right all along.
All right, well, he was a genius a long time ago. We all knew it, and it's proving it once again. Dan Riskin, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Take care.